and welcome to Inside Edition, where we discuss national, regional, and international issues in depth. Since its establishment in 1992, Bahrain Economists Society has been working actively to represent the essential role and great contribution of economics to the comprehensive human development, as well as highlighting various economic issues and providing best solutions in cooperation with local and international institutions. To know more about the achievements and aspirations of Bahrain Economists Society, we are pleased to be joined here in the studio by its president, Dr. Omar Al-Ubaidly. Welcome back. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Omar Al-Ubaidly, who is the president of the Bahrain Economists Society. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Doctor, first off, can you tell us about the establishment of Bahrain Economists Society in addition to its main mission and its vision?
So the Bahrain Economists Society was founded, actually 2022 will be its 30-year anniversary. It was established in 1992 by a group of at the time up-and-coming economists. Now they're all established and hold very important positions in all sectors of society. Anyway, they were a group of, at the time, up-and-coming economists who sensed the need to organize economists to undertake a mission of public awareness, of raising the standard of engagement in economic issues between the civil sector, the private sector, the government sector. Bahrain has always had a vibrant civil society sector, so they surmised the best way to do this was to establish a society, much like the economic societies you find in every country, and presumably which they were actually members of when they went to do their PhDs outside Bahrain. And they launched it and they worked very hard, and then eventually, as their responsibilities outside the society grew, they passed the baton on to the newer generation of economists, and that's where we are today. Yeah,
wonderful. When you say when you talk about their missions, their main missions, to bring the economic statuses, or basically the solutions for economic issues, closer to people, what exactly are the things that you target or research?
So, I mean, we as you said, the mission is, first of all, there's two aspects of it. One aspect is a general public awareness aspect, because economics is not a subject that is traditionally given much importance in schools, in universities in the region. For example, in Bahrain, only recently have the local universities started offering a major in economics, and so that's and part of the realization for the importance of economics is due to the efforts of the founders of the Bahrain Economic Society. So part of it is a public awareness, making people realize what is economics, why is it important, how does the economy work. Very often the government or companies take decisions which are confusing, are complex, they require a certain level of expertise to understand, and part of the mission of the society is to translate these complex decisions into the language which a layperson can understand. Absolutely. So that's part of it, and the other part is engagement and activism. We through the events that we organize, through the activities that we arrange, we come out with policy proposals, we gather data, we produce new arguments, and we put all these things into publications, sometimes into reports, depending on the nature of the event and the nature of the activity, and then hope that these policy recommendations and these suggestions might be of interest to those who are responsible for taking important decisions.
Absolutely. Well, facilitation, key word here. How do you value the constant facilitation provided by the Bahraini government in specific to the national economy and its infrastructure?
Well, so the Bahrain government, there's several organs in the government that relate to the economy. You have obviously the cabinet directly, the Prime Minister's office, but in addition to that, you have the Ministry of Finance and National Economy. You have the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Commerce, Commerce and Tourism. And you have, to some extent, the IGA, the Information and Electronic Government Authority. So all these different organs have a role to play in Bahrain's economic policy. The central bank, of course, I forgot to mention. And so each of them, takes decisions in certain realms. And our role partially as a society is to interact with these entities, to understand what they're doing, to expose what they're doing to the scrutiny of the general public through the events that we do, and to allow people to air their views, to understand the things that they don't understand, and then relay that back to those entities in an attempt to support them in their decision making. And that's a very sort of vibrant process, and we're very happy that representatives of all these organizations regularly attend our events, regularly participate in our events as stakeholders, and support our events by sending their important their key stakeholders to participate in it, and to attend and watch and listen. And then also we have a great relationship with several private sector entities, which we are happy provide us with financial support so that we can undertake our activities and realize our mission.
In reality, it's a very wholesome procedure that you take on there. Now, another one of these entities that have a lot to do with the society are the legislative branches of the government, which play a pivotal role in giving full priority to the economic sector. Mm-hmm. How do you value this kind of support?
So the legislature, both the Shura Council and the Nuwab Council, both have a constitutionally mandated responsibility regarding the economy. I believe they both have committees assigned to economic and financial issues, and then when it comes to pivotal decisions such as the budget, they have to approve these things according to the constitutionally approved procedures of both chambers. And so they play a central role in the economy, and they interact with us regularly. For example, the Parliament has these committees that they convene, regularly reach out to a variety of stakeholders when they need to take a vote or a decision on an important issue. And we're happy to say that the Bahrain Economic Society is one of the entities to whom they reach out, and we are always very happy to provide them with our views on some of these important issues, and to discuss with them formally and informally their views, in addition to interacting with them via the events that we hold. We're proud to have had members of Parliament, members of the Shura Council participate in our events as speakers, again, just as I mentioned with the previous government entities, and attending and listening. And they're on our mailing lists, our WhatsApp distribution lists, and they regularly chime in. And in fact, some of our elite members and some of the founders are now currently members of the Shura Council as well. So it's a very dynamic and an interactive relationship between us and Parliament, and it's one that we cherish.
Absolutely. Well, one of the really important goals that are set in front of all societies and institutions in the government, also private sectors in Bahrain, are the SDGs, specifically the national SDGs. So how does the Bahrain Economists Society basically contribute to achieving the national 2030 Sustainable Development Goals?
So again, we go back to the two primary mission elements of the Bahrain Economic Society, in the awareness side and both on the activism side. We during the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, we held a virtual seminar with engineer Suzanne Ajawi on the issue of Bahrain and climate change and environmental policy in Bahrain. At the time, she was working for the Supreme Council for the Environment, and that was enlightening for our audience, for our membership, for me as well, to learn about exactly what are Bahrain's plans and visions for sustainable environmental policy. How do we go about making these decisions? What are the pros and cons of the various options available? So that's an example through an event. And then also at the moment we have podcasts on issues relating to sustainability. At the moment we conduct surveys on issues pertaining to sustainability. We distribute articles and knowledge that we gather, and then also we write some of our own things regarding these issues. So these all reflect as you mentioned, the central role that sustainability plays in the economic strategy of the Kingdom of Bahrain. As you're aware, the SDGs were formally incorporated into the government action plan around 4 or 5 years ago. And so it is important for every citizen and resident of the kingdom to be aware of what role environment plays in economic policy and how they can go about contributing to that. And we've seen plenty of positive civilian contributions. I'm sure you saw a couple of months ago there was a big effort to clean up Al Jazair beach, a big voluntary effort. And my children at school, my children's school, they regularly have activities where they raise awareness about the environment and contribute to cleaning things up. Bahraini Economist Society tries to contribute to all of these activities, as I say, through awareness and through direct engagement.
Right. These are some small events, but the society actually has a couple of major events like the ones you talked about previously. But we want to go more into detail. What kind of events and activities are organized by the society to spread awareness, to open up subjects that were taboo before, anything like that? What are the events you organize?
So, you know, to give an example of something which at the time was certainly seen as sensitive, but we're glad that we broached it because it's very important. Early in 2021, we had one of the directors of the Ministry of Finance and National Economy, Mr. Qatan Saleh, and she would very kindly agreed to be a speaker in one of our virtual events, and the topic of the event was Bahrain's fiscal budget deficit and how to address Bahrain's fiscal deficit. What are the options available to the Kingdom of Bahrain? What are the advantages and disadvantages of all these different things? And it was a very how shall I say a vivacious activity, because many people had questions which they wanted to pose to someone who had her level of expertise and knowledge, and she was fortunately very willing and able to answer those questions and to explain the thought making behind what is undoubtedly a sensitive but important issue. So that's just one example. We've on the side we've been doing recently surveys. We have a panel of approximately 50 leading economists who are experts on the Bahrain economy, and we survey them every month on, first of all, two things. First of all, how the economy how they think the economy is doing, and what their expectations are for the future. They're going to think the economy is going up, staying stable, and staying down, and this is a sensitive question. But we think it's better that this question be asked to people who know what they're talking about, and that this answer be then published so that people are aware. And we also asked them about another important topic that happens to be, in the public sphere. So, we asked them about recently the issue of taxes on remittances, which is again a sensitive issue, because with Bahrain's imposition of VAT, or I should say plans to raise VAT from 5 to 10%, one of the alternatives posited has been a tax on remittances or foreign transfers as a substitute for a tax on increased tax on goods and services. And when we surveyed Bahrain's expert economists, we found that there was significant pushback against that idea, because it could have a negative impact on Bahrain's standing as an international hub for capital. It could lead to capital leaving Bahrain, which would be something that is damaging to Bahrain's commercial environment. And so that's a sensitive issue, a hot issue. And we asked the question directly to a group of very well-informed experts, some of whom are members of the society, some of whom are not. And we received their transparent answers and published them as soon as we had them. They're all available on our website, on our Instagram, on our social media. And we invite anyone to read them and to comment and reflect upon them. And we even have a newsletter, a quarterly newsletter, where we invite submissions in terms of articles. Anyone who would like to air their view, would like to write an article about what they feel about the Bahraini economy, a certain aspect which they think is important. The only criteria we have is quality. If you have something to say and you were able to articulate it in a professional way and in a convincing way, then we welcome it, and we would be delighted to publish this in our newsletter.
Amazing. Has to pertain to the subject itself, and of course, as you said, quality. When it comes to the economic, basically the reviews of the economic status of Bahrain or the region or everything. I'm sure there was a huge difference with the beginning of the pandemic and where we are now. Can you tell us about the veer and the shift in the thinking of economists dealing with the pandemic in our region and in Bahrain specifically?
Yeah, so the first point to note is that the last pandemic of the scale that we witnessed with COVID was the Spanish flu at the beginning of the 20th century, approximately 100 years ago. It was just after World War I. And the reason that's important is that several generations of economists have been trained without having experienced a pandemic before. And nobody who lived through almost nobody who lived through the Spanish flu pandemic is alive today to explain to us or to give us insights as to, first-hand insights as to how one goes about dealing with it from an economic side, what kind of economic disruption is caused by a pandemic. And so what that meant was that at the beginning of the pandemic on this occasion, economists were firstly keen to analyze and observe. And they had some policy prescriptions, but the policy prescriptions were mostly surrounding emergency measures, emergency interventions, not sort of long-term structural changes, just stop gaps for the next month or two while we gather more data and understand what's going on. As the pandemic has unfolded, in all domains, in all fields, including economics itself, we've seen unprecedented amount of scientific production. The number of papers published, the number of books written, and so on, it just continues to grow at an unprecedented rate. And so what's happening is that we're beginning to slowly synthesize the knowledge we have. We're understanding much more how people react to things like social distancing, what kind of impact a vaccine has, why do people have vaccine hesitancy, how can you, what sorts of work are suitable for remote delivery, what are the pros and cons of, for example, household delivery, these kind of things. And slowly a synthesis is emerging, and now you're beginning to see much more concrete prescriptions on how to deal with pandemics from the economic side, and how to, in particular, brace for future pandemics, because we're told from epidemiologists that this unfortunate episode is not going to be as uncommon as it has been in the past, and we may have to brace ourselves for this sort of thing happening every 10 years. And so therefore it is incumbent upon us to not to just sort of revert to how everything was and then just blindly walk into the next pandemic if and when it arises, but to actually build in resilience methods, ways of facilitating a transition. And the simplest illustration of that, I was recently giving a talk in the Bahrain Institute for Banking and Finance, and they have a new building. It's a beautiful new building actually in Bahrain Bay, and their classrooms are all equipped with state-of-the-art hybrid technology. So you can have anyone in the class physically in the classroom or at home, and let's hope a pandemic doesn't come, but if there's any disruption in the immediate future or further down the line, with the click of a finger, they can transfer to hybrid, and students will suffer almost no change or no adverse effects to the curriculum, and that's just one example of how whereas at the beginning of the pandemic, most education institutions did not have cameras, did not have sound effects, did not have servers, did not have software, and all these kind of things set up. Hadn't trained the teachers, hadn't trained the students, hadn't trained the parents. And that's all just the education sector, and you can repeat this exercise in all other sectors. So now the focus is much more, as we reach what we hope to be the latter stages of the pandemic, how can one brace oneself for future pandemics and limit the adverse consequences.
That's the way it would be. Well, another thing that I want to talk about is basically what are the efforts that were exerted by the society to spread awareness about economic aspects among the Bahraini community. Now, we're not talking specifically now with the pandemic, but it's a big example on how the awareness had to be changed for them. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the efforts exerted in spreading awareness?
So we traditionally our events have been, we either rent a room in, I should say, a hall in a hotel or in some other building and hold our events there. And we usually get 30 to 40 people coming, and it would be a physical event, like almost all societies. But since the pandemic started, we switched to virtual mode, and this has had one major advantage to us, is that we've been able to allow for guests who are not physically located in Bahrain to be speakers.
Yes.
So we had, for example, His Highness Adham Al Saeed from Oman, who gave us a very interesting talk on the Omani economy from the comfort of his own home, which we would not have been able to do 2 years ago. That's just one example. We also had from an American economist, Dr. Karen Young, who has been studying foreign direct investment in the Gulf for several years, and her expertise is very deep and very unique. And she resides in Washington D.C.
It would have been difficult.
The Bahrain Economic Society does not have the financial resources to allow for someone like Dr. Young to come to Bahrain to give us a seminar. But thanks to thanks to Zoom and thanks to the awareness on the digital awareness that has emerged with the pandemic, we were able to host her for a very interesting talk, which spawned a lot of interesting follow-up discussion. And those are just one example. So we've been able to bring in, first of all, people who we would not usually have, and inevitably they've touched on important economic issues that are faced by the Gulf countries and Bahrain at present. And secondly, by switching to virtual mode, we've been able to hold events more frequently. And then in addition to that, as I say, with the surveys that we've started, with the podcasts and with the newsletter, which have been going on in the background, we've been, in the switch to digital, interactions. Our social media is much more active than it was prior to the pandemic. And that means that we've been able to engage people on a day-to-day basis much more than we were before. So those are all illustrations of how we've adapted to these unusual circumstances, and like many other organizations, we've turned these challenges into opportunities to realize our mission in an unusual, in a different way, and also to elevate our performance.
Absolutely, contributing to the SDGs as well.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, to you specifically, you've always had this affirmation that engaging the youth in economic issues is a very important factor. So in a recently published statement, you actually have affirmed the necessity of engaging youth in economic issues.
Right.
What can you tell us about reasons and the importance of this kind of approach? And what do you expect is going to come out of it?
So, the Bahraini society, or Gulf society in general, it remains quite traditional, and tribalism plays an important role in our society, in our family units. And from I'm sure your own family, no doubt, that one of the norms of a tribal life is that the elder members of the family are the ones who talk, and the younger members of the family are the ones who listen.
Right.
And while that that has its roots in a certain way of life, in the 21st century, with the advent of modern education and now remote education, for example, some of our members, our board secretary, Fatma Al-Bastigi, she graduated from the BIBF LSE bachelor's degree without ever going to London. She did her entire degree from Bahrain in this joint program. That's something which would not have been possible 15, 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
So people like her and our other members of our society are now, because of their excellent training, are able to they have important analysis and insights which they want to articulate. But the way our society is built, many of the channels which are traditionally provided in many Western countries to allow the youth to engage, to provide their insights, to play a role, are not completely available. And sometimes it can be just as simple as a social norm where when you're sitting in a majlis, it's considered inappropriate for a young person to speak, and we're just supposed to be listening to the older people. So we think that as a society, and several of our board members are, in the youth category. Sadly, I've departed from that from that range, but many of my colleagues are. But we think it's important that the youth that their insights be shared, and we provide mechanisms for that. All the social media and switch to digital content is very much a way of empowering youth, because the youth are the ones who know how to use Instagram, who know how to use these different methods, and are very comfortable engaging in a discussion over Zoom, whereas your grandmother might have a bit more difficulty doing something like that. So that's one aspect, and then the other aspect is that as part of giving people, it's for people to feel productive, for people to feel that they're respected and happy. They need to feel that their dignity is acknowledged, and giving youth a voice. It's not just about them having good insights which you want to hear. It's also about, affording them the dignity of that they are members of society. They have an equal weight to anybody else. Somebody who's 20 is just as worthy of being given their personal rights and their respect as someone who's 50, as someone who's 70. And therefore it's important to have a happy society and an economically productive society. Everybody's dignity needs to be respected, and sometimes with our Gulf societies we can forget, we can omit, we can overlook giving youth respecting their dignity, and we want to encourage all our stakeholders to realize that an 18-year-old or a 15-year-old deserves to be heard.
Yes, absolutely. We had a show a couple of days ago. We actually talked a little bit, me and the guest, about empowering youth financially in schools by teaching in schools money management techniques, teaching more of a financial aspect when it comes to economic aspect of the country you're in, and so on. How do you view that kind of spreading of awareness? Do you think it's important to have this in schools so the youth do have that concept that we ourselves did not learn except after school, maybe in high school?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the other societies that I'm a board member of, which is the Youth Pioneer Society, has a program dedicated to it's called Dinari, which has correctly, in my opinion, diagnosed the existence of a deep problem in Bahrain and in all the Gulf countries regarding financial literacy.
Right.
I grew up in the UK, and when I was in 14 in the UK in secondary school, they taught us how to write a check. They explained to us what the difference in a debit card and a credit card is. They showed us how to open a bank account, and they gave us elementary tools for budgetary planning. They explained to us that once you don't live with your mother and father, once you live on your own, what are the sort of bills you're going to have to pay? How do you make a financial plan, and these kind of things. And this was in a public school, a state school, at the age of 14. And in our region, these kind of educational lessons are basically completely absent. And this has dire consequences for the economy and for societal welfare, because you see that people regularly get into difficult situations with their personal debt. They're unable to plan in an effective way for important life milestones such as getting married, purchasing a vehicle, getting a job that suits their aspirations, building or buying a house, and all these kind of important milestones are it's much more difficult to realize them if you don't have the basics of financial literacy. And in fact, during the pandemic, the government has on several occasions, including I believe last week, introduced and extended loan deferrals as a decision from the central bank, and perhaps the need for loan deferrals would be diminished if our society had high levels of financial literacy. And so it is incumbent. I'm very happy that the Youth Pioneer Society is addressing this directly. And as economists, when we had that session on the Bahrain budget, the tone of the session was very much about how you need to learn to live within your means, whether it's a level of the country, at the level of your organization, at the level of your family, or the level of yourself as an individual. And that's something which, because issues such as unemployment, issues such as personal finance come up regularly in all of our talks. As in a society, we are happy that we can play a positive role in educating people about these issues and alerting them to the importance of understanding these issues, and then giving them tools. When we have podcasts about that touch on these issues, we hope that people who listen to the podcast or who read about these kind of things in the newsletter then have their interest piqued, and then go and read about them more elsewhere, perhaps watch a YouTube instruction or something along those lines. Right.
The Bahrain Economists Society are experts within their field because of a lot of the work they do, especially the research that you do. So from your point of view, supporting and conducting research in economic fields is actually an integral part of the Bahrain Economics Society work. What is the importance of these exerted efforts in this regard?
So when we conduct research, first of all, there's a chronic problem in Bahrain and in the Gulf, which is that there's a lack of analysis on our economies conducted by local experts. Okay, so we have a lot of written about, for example, the UAE economy or the Saudi economy, but by people in London, people in Washington DC, people in Paris, Frankfurt, so on and so forth. And that's great. On the contrary, the fact that people and experts in other countries study our region is a good thing. Yeah. We don't want to be a region that's completely ignored and nobody writes about. But what's concerning for us as a society and for me as a local economist is the dearth of research, homegrown research, what I would describe it as homegrown research on our economy. And there's two reasons why it's important to have homegrown research. The first is that no matter how educated and well-credentialed people in London, DC, Frankfurt are, there are certain aspects of our local society and our local economy that you can only really understand if you're on the ground here and if you're from the region. And so if we don't have homegrown research, then we place an artificial bar, artificial ceiling on the quality of the research that gets done on the region. So in order to realize the highest quality research, it's important that homegrown economists, including those in the Bahraini Economic Society, take part. The second reason is a sort of somewhat more sinister, but it's the reality of the conflicts of interest. We cannot rely purely on foreigners to analyze the economy and produce research that is used to either make the public aware or inform policy. It's important from a conflict of interest perspective that citizens, people who are citizens of this country, people who have a place of priority on the national interests of Bahrain are at the front line of conducting research relating to the region. And that's why, therefore, as a society, we conduct this research and articulate it and disseminate it with the emphasis on the fact that Bahrainis are conducting this research and leading this research and expressing it in the language that Bahrainis understand and in a way that reflects an understanding of what Bahrainis care about and what Bahrainis should care about.
Absolutely. Being in a society such as Bahrain and the GCC being very similar to each other, there are even differences when it comes to the social network that we have. I mean, children stay in the homes of their parents longer in our areas. They work later in life, or they study more. Their education is longer. They get their PhDs by their 30s.
Yes.
You're a prime example of that. So definitely there is a big difference. But from your point of view, how do you see the future of economic development in the kingdom after the pandemic? So
the Ministry of Finance and National Economy actually held a press conference about, I think it was at the end of October, just over a month ago, where they launched the pandemic recovery economic program. And it was the press conference. There were several other entities there with them, I believe. Temkeen, EDB, Ministry of Trade and Industry, Commerce, and the Ministry of Labour, all there. I believe were represented in this in this launch. And it seems that there's a wide variety of programs that they're hoping to launch, which targets, first of all, diversifying the economic base and creating job opportunities for Bahraini citizens as a priority, and raising the level of economic growth. And it's too early to cast judgment on the prospects for those plans, but it's pretty obvious that a lot of attention has been paid to formulating these plans in a way that suits Bahrain's needs. And now, what we're all, going to be doing is watching eagerly and participating in being involved in any way we can in realizing Bahrain's economic aspirations. And our hope as a society is that, over the next 2 or 3 years, the targets set by this new economic strategy are met. And that living standards in Bahrain will continue to rise, and that job opportunities will be created for locals, and that everybody will feel that they're in a dynamic and vibrant economy with an exciting future.
Right. Well. The pandemic, we talked a little bit about the pandemic and the challenges that it basically has shown, whether in Bahrain specifically or in the region. But some of these challenges were turned into opportunities. Bahrain was actually semi-prepared for the whole switch to technology with the AWS headquarters here, and different institutions like the University of Bahrain making a whole e-learning department or center. So in your opinion, how can the countries turn the pandemic challenges into opportunities for economic development?
So, I mean, I think that one of the key ways in which Bahrain can benefit is from taking the lead of the National Task Force for confronting the COVID-19 challenge. This National Task Force, which we've been seeing on TV, holding their press conferences, twice a week or however often it is for the last year and a half, have shown us many exciting ways of and effective ways of conducting government business. And it would be an excellent, this presents an excellent opportunity for Bahrain to export these excellent, these exemplary methods from the task force to the rest of the government. To give you a simple example, the way in which the research and policy have been integrated. Every day, the people in the task force are primarily clinical and academic researchers. Right. Housed in the local universities and hospitals. People like Dr. Manaf al-Qahtani and Jalil al-Sayyid and others. And these are people who publish research papers. And now, traditionally in Bahrain, it's been difficult for researchers to analyze policy in a deep way because data have not been made available to researchers. Right. But during this pandemic, the researchers who were deeply involved in policy had access to the data. And what this meant was that, first of all, they could use that data and analyze it to give very up-to-date recommendations to the cabinet when it comes to decisions regarding which vaccine to take, when to impose lockdowns, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. And then they could publish those research. If you go to the websites of these researchers, these scholars, you'll find they have dozens of papers now published in peer-reviewed academic journals on the issue of the pandemic. And why is the publishing good? Because when they publish, this is subjected to peer review. Their colleagues from all around the world, not just in Bahrain, read these papers and have to sign off on these papers, and they show that these papers have reached a satisfactory level of scientific competence. Right. And this means that this helps elevate the quality of the policy making, because the policy making is grounded in research which has been approved or has been acknowledged at an international level. Yes. And that's why we've seen a very dynamic and responsive policy. We've had several vaccines. We've had Sinopharm, the Sputnik, the AstraZeneca, and the Pfizer. And different ones have been effective in different ways and for different groups. Right. And so because they collect data and they analyze that data in real time and publish papers and speak in conferences, they get excellent feedback, and they then come back and change the policies and adapt the policies to this new insights they're getting. I took Sinopharm's vaccine early on in December, and in June, I believe it was, the Bahrain, which is I think you saw this week, we're number one in the world in terms of boosters given. And I think in June was the directive emerged from the National Task Force that people who've taken the Sinopharm vaccine need to take the booster. Right. And I took that booster. Had the researchers not had access to the data, and had they not been able to engage in dialogue with their peers in other countries about the data that they were seeing, then we wouldn't have had that policy recommendation come out and that change and that adapt. And now we're seeing, I think we just had that people who've taken 3 Sinopharms are now going to have another booster, and many other changes. We've seen the switch from initially, our status depended on the percentage of positive cases per day. Now we've seen a shift to the case depending on the percentage of people in hospital or who are facing are in critical health state. And that change, again, this is not something that just they read in a textbook or that fell from the sky.
They saw the numbers.
They saw the numbers, they analyzed them, they spoke to their peers in other countries who are facing obviously a similar situation and arrived that this is the right time to change the policy in this way. So going back to your original question, for me, one of the greatest opportunities that we can draw from this pandemic is taking that model of deep synergy between research and policy making, and which requires total data transparency and availability, and adapt it and applying it to other ministries and other sectors. Yeah. It's no coincidence to me that the task force has done so well. Thanks to Allah. It's as a direct consequence of these kind of methods. If they had used an old method where they'd not made the data available, where they'd not published their findings, where they'd not spoken in conferences about what they see, then you would have not seen such a dynamic and effective pandemic response. Yeah. So my hope as a president of the Bahraini Economic Society is that other governmental entities look at what the task force has done and say, look, these people have done so well that a medal has been made in their honor. Right. And I believe that many of them a couple of weeks ago were richly deserved in getting the acknowledgement and getting appreciation from Bahrain, from the citizenry, from His Majesty the King. I would like to see every other government entity understanding that part of the reason for that is this synergy, and saying, okay, look, we can do this. We can have just as much synergy between research and policy making as the National Task Force did. Let's do the same, and then hopefully we can produce outcomes that make Bahrain just as proud as we are proud of the task force.
Absolutely, and just putting on top of that the data collection and the creation of algorithms to collect that kind of data actually gives some kind of confidence in the answers that the Team Bahrain gave on any other field that has that data and makes it transparent. You have the confidence, okay, these people are talking out of experience of something that they have seen. The numbers don't lie in that effect.
Absolutely.
Well, in your opinion, regarding the vast spread of, the pandemic did a lot of things, but one of the positive things that it did, as an economist, you'll see it from your point of view, is the creation of virtual banks. Specifically, Bahrain is a hub and a home to many of these banks. So regarding this spread of virtual banks and the digital currencies, do you think that the huge involvement of technology will reshape the economy on the local and international levels?
So first of all, it's important to note that the Bahrain's been investing in financial technology for some time now, and well in advance of the pandemic. Yeah. I believe it was 2018 when the Bahrain FinTech Bay was established, but the Central Bank of Bahrain has been actually recognized internationally for the quality of its governance and its regularity oversight for the sector. Right. And it's always been the central bank at one of its goals has been to encourage innovation in the financial sector, and that includes technology. Now we've all started using benefit pay of late, but some people were using benefit pay well in advance, and it wasn't a technology which just emerged in February 2020. It's existed for a while. They've been working hard on it. They developed it and adapted it in the last few months, propelled by the increasing popularity. But you could use e-wallets and all these different options well in advance of the pandemic. Now the goal, when in a small country like Bahrain, you can't be a technological leader in lots of different things. We're not China, we're not America, we don't have 300 million or 1 billion people who can invest in all the different technologies and develop expertise. We have 1.5 million people, and so we have to be judicious in where we allocate our talent. Yeah. And I think it's a wise decision to focus on financial technology, because that's something which we have a history in, and that's something which many people have a passion for. And so now what you're seeing is Bahrain I believe is one of the first countries in the world is a world leader in cryptocurrency regulations, and as you say, in the transition to virtual banks, and the Central Bank of Bahrain is very how should I say vigilant in ensuring that these advances occur in a way that does not shake people's confidence in the financial system, because Bahrain needs to have a stable financial system in order for it to continue attracting capital and making investors feel safe. And so, as a citizen and as a member of the Bahraini Economic Society, I'm very excited by the prospect of new financial technologies emerging, and for these technologies to make my life easier, to make my transactions more convenient. I remember how frustrating it is when you go to a restaurant with friends and you'd want to split the bill, and you have this whole, I've only got 20 dinars, you've only got 20 dinars, how are you going to end this? Now, with the three clicks of the phone, everything is done. Now, obviously, that's a bit of a silly example in the sense that, economy is not made or isn't going to be made or broken, but it's representative of much more important transactions which happen. How many more things are we able to buy conveniently and with a lower, as you mentioned earlier, carbon footprint now, because if we have effective and trustworthy technologies? I'm happy to, whereas previously something which I've wanted to eat or something which I wanted to purchase for immediate consumption, I would have had to go without. Now I can immediately order it and it arrives, and I'm confident that this method will ensure that the person receives their money. That person will be confident in scheduling the delivery, because they've received their money instantly. And that's good for economy. And you've seen many young Bahrainis and old Bahrainis now establish businesses at home, which they would not have been able to do without the switch to electronic transactions. They can do their businesses at home and be confident that they will receive payment for their products, and therefore this has allowed them to raise their quality of their life, because maybe they have circumstances which do not allow them to be a member of the labor force unless they're at home. Maybe they have young children, maybe they have an infirm, elderly person whom they have to take after, maybe they have their own physical challenges. These people would have been excluded from the economy. They would not have been able to contribute under the previous financial technologies. Under the new financial technologies, on the contrary, they have an advantage and they can be active members of the economy, and that's great for the economy and for their personal dignity.
I think one of the positive things that the banks locally, even the virtual banks, are doing are that they are engulfing the culture of the country into the saving aspects when it comes to debit cards. You have certain programs that have that concept of hasala, which is a very local thing, and people start interacting with it more because they understand the old concept, but it's modernized in some kind of way.
Absolutely.
Modern means of social media actually facilitate, and you spoke about it a little bit, facilitate direct communication with your target audience, especially during the pandemic or the current health circumstances where we're hopefully slowly getting out of the pandemic. How does the society make use of that, the social medias?
We go back to earlier the discussion regarding youth. So social media, has its pros and cons. I'm not going to pretend as if social media is all as a bed of roses, but the most important thing about social media is that it democratizes the process of expressing your views. Under traditional media, whoever had control over those media outlets, be they the newspapers, TV, radio, were gatekeepers. And no matter how well-intentioned those gatekeepers were, at the end of the day, they were gatekeepers. And so people who didn't have access to those gatekeepers couldn't articulate their views in the general sphere. And so social media has been very liberating at the societal level in allowing people to express their views without having to go through the sometimes bureaucratic process of negotiating with a newspaper or a TV station or whatever to get their view out there. And then from the society's perspective, this is great because one of the social media, first of all, allows us to get our views out quickly and accurately, without fearing that things might get lost in translation, without fearing that this article was supposed to come out today in the newspaper, but it was bumped because something more important came, or it was supposed to be on the front page, but it went to the middle or something. We don't have to worry about any of that. We're happy for it to be published in the newspapers and so on and so forth, but we don't have to rely on that. We can engage our audience directly. And secondly, the reality is that many of the traditional media methods just didn't strike a chord with a large percentage of the population. Youth in the digital age especially, they don't really watch TV very much anymore. They certainly don't read newspapers very much. And social media has become must if you want to engage if you want to make sure you engage society. And so as a society, we've been using, whereas our forefathers in the 90s, had a total reliance on events and written media for interacting and communicating with stakeholders.
Yeah.
For us now, the weight is heavily on social media, and that's been accentuated during the pandemic, because I would classify things like Zoom, and Microsoft Teams as subsets of the social media. And so and it's allowed us to expand our membership base, to have the youngest board, I would hazard, that we've ever had as a society. Don't tell the older guys that. And therefore attract much newer talent without losing, the expertise of the older ones. I mean, maybe it's grudging, but they know how to use Instagram. They know how to use Twitter. Maybe they don't have as many followers as some of the younger ones, but they still do have, they still use the social media and follow it and enjoy it. So for us, it's been a great way of expanding our helping us realize our mission and reaching out to broader section of society. Yeah,
there's an equilibrium there. Mm-hmm. Well, after almost 30 years of dedicated efforts, what are the main achievements accomplished by Bahrain Economist Society, and what are the procedures to maintain this success?
So, for us, first of all, just for a society to exist and to function for 30 years is something that we're very proud of. And, the thanks to that has to go to all my predecessors in the boards and presidents of the society who've worked for zero financial benefit. They've done it out of a sense of civic responsibility and out of passion for their profession. So all of the previous boards and presidents are the ones who we have to thank for first of all keeping the society alive and keeping it relevant. And the reality is that Bahrain Economic Society is an entity that has a reputation. That brand means something, and it's thanks to their efforts. What are the achievements? Well, the achievements are that we've, for 30 years, convened some of Bahrain's most important economists and policymakers in the economic realm on a regular basis, and allowed them to engage with each other and with the public on issues of economic importance. And kept that, and we've represented an important channel linking government and private sector and civil society to each other. And we're very proud of that. And we're also proud of the fact that we've evolved as the national circumstances have evolved, as technologies have evolved. The way in which we do our business today is very different to the way in which the society did its business in the middle 90s. And that's something that is good because it reflects flexibility and adaptability in the organization. And that's something which we're very keen to see continue in the future. We will be launching in the coming months a membership drive. We hope to have, we're hoping to go to schools and convince 14, 15, 16-year-olds to consider joining the society and to be involved in economics in Bahrain and to be aware of the latest issues.
Absolutely, looking forward to that. Before we leave you today, we really would like to know from you, what are the future plans and the upcoming projects that are being prepared currently by the society?
So we, as I mentioned, first of all, we are going to be doing a membership drive, but that's something more sort of one-off to try and expand our awareness. We're going to be continuing. We have 3 or 4 core activities which we're going to be expanding. My colleague, Dr. Hana Bawazir, she's a board member. She's spearheading our events she's spearheading our efforts at organising events, and she was going to be unwrapping a very exciting event series for 2022. My colleague, I mentioned, Fatma Al-Bastigi, she's in charge of our podcasts and our newsletter, and there'll be lots of new content in the coming year there too. My colleague Mahmoud Abdallah and my other colleague Mariam Al-Abdallah have both been working very hard in producing a bulletin where a monthly bulletin where we cover what the world says about the Bahraini economy. Namely, that if you open any newspaper, if you follow newspapers in the world, they say things about the Bahraini economy. And one of our jobs is to bring that information to Bahraini. So that's going to be continuing. And we also have the survey that we conduct every month that will be continuing, and we'll be getting more and more data on business confidence in Bahrain. So lots to describe, lots to follow, and we hope that If you want to keep abreast, Bahrain Economists, just search for it in Google or in Instagram and follow, and we'll keep you posted.
We'll provide the accounts on the show. Thank you so much for being with us and answering our questions today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.